Welcome to Behind the Mystery, our podcast where we talk about historical tidbits and background information, trivia that shows up in some of my books. I'm Lee Strauss. This is my husband, Norm Strauss, and thank you for joining us today. We have some really interesting things to talk about that show up in this book, Murder at Kensington Gardens. At first blush, you might think that it's a book about be about royal people of interest, but it's just the murder happens or is discovered in the gardens at Kensington Gardens. But there is a lot of really interesting insights to history there. One of the things is that what I forget a lot of times is that the British Empire was still going fairly strong back in the early 1920s. And there was still a real empire, us and colonial territories, them sort of mentality and how that translated into everyday life in London. And in particular, I found of interest was Harrods' Wild Animal Kingdom.
Which I had never really, I've heard that phrase before, but I didn't really know anything about it. So this was really interesting to look into.
Yes, and it was something that I happened upon in my research because in our sort of a contemporary mentality, we just wouldn't even consider that something like this is an option. And if you don't know what this is, I will explain it and we'll tell you about it. But first of all, most people have heard of Harrods. Harrods is a very well-established enterprise in London. It takes like blocks. In fact, I read it's a department store, for which now we would consider like a luxury department store.
Like super high end. Super
high end. I don't know if it was that high end back then, but it was still considered pretty exotic and for a department store. This is kind of hard to wrap my head around. It was 1.1 million square feet.
Wow.
Which is 100,000 meters square. Like it was enormous, like 4 floors, and the facade was very elaborate too. On the current one, the original one had actually burnt down, and then when they rebuilt it, a lot of famous and wealthy people, they took credit, where they would buy on credit and stuff. But anyways, I guess in some way this helped finance the rebuilding of it. And also, one of the things I thought was kind of interesting when I was researching just about Herod, I mean, everybody knows about Lady Diana and her involvement with the Mr. Farad. I'm not sure if that's how you say it, but anyways, they are the Harrod. Their family ended up purchasing Harrods, and it became their family thing. So that's more of a contemporary piece of information. But for back in the day, Harrods was the first department store to insert an escalator. It's like moving stairs. And the original version was quite, what's the word? Not modest, but it was...
Elaborate?
No, it was the opposite of elaborate.
Humble?
Humble. Yes, the original escalator was very humble. It was actually like a leather... oh my God.
A leather conveyor belt?
Yes, thank you. It was like a leather conveyor belt. And, they had railings that you had to hold on to get to the top. And what they say, the rumor is, and maybe this is true, is that they would offer people a little shot of brandy when they got to the top to help settle their nerves.
Hello.
Hello, you made it to the next floor alive.
So the brandy was to like revive them, right? So
yes. I don't know. They should probably have had some at the bottom too to give them some courage to get on the thing.
My mind immediately goes to I get to the top and take some brandy and
take the stairs later, back down.
I need more revival.
I'm going to do this right again. Yeah. So this is Harrods. And Harrods sold all kinds of things, from jewelry to coffins, high-end fashions. They whatever could be sold was sold there, including exotic animals. And so in their basement, people could go and they could, after they were done perusing the hat aisle, they could go down and take a look at the different animals on offer. And that would include, I have a little list here: parrots, monkeys, pythons, crocodiles, foxes, raccoons, and some young, large cats like lions and panthers and stuff. And
Now it sounds weird to us today, but
Yeah.
if you think back, even in ancient Egypt and stuff, and all the really rich rulers and rich, upper crust of society, they would, you'd often see this picture of the ruler with the pet cheetah or something like that, or we don't have a pet cheetah or a black panther, but we do have a pretty exotic house cat.
we do.
Flown in from the north of town,
Bobby Pippins.
who we've introduced already.
But, I don't know I think probably the kings and all the upper crust people did have these things. It was actually a status symbol to have like a parrot in your conservatory or a monkey in your parlor or whatever, and people would come over, and it would show that you were of a certain class. Like the wealthy could buy anything. And there was a mentality that the people in the British Empire, the humans, had every right to conquer and own whatever was available in the territories, the colonial territories. So it was a real different mindset. And when I was researching this book, it came to me as a little of a surprise, because that is just so not modern thinking when it comes towards how to treat animals, or even the danger of having a pet lion, right? For people,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how many people died at the hands of their pets back in those days, but there was probably a few. So, and in my
rogue, I picture right away, my mind goes to the absurd. I don't know why, but
Yeah.
I picture like a rogue ostrich or something running amok in the palace.
Yeah, we were in the fields, and probably ostriches were among those exotic pets that people would own, and they'd show off their ostrich eggs. I could see it. So it was a different time, and so this is one of the sort of backdrops that I came across for Murder at Kensington Gardens, and it was a bit of a plot device too. I needed an exotic animal, and that's how I obtained it. But this mentality, they didn't have a real sense of animal rights or anything like that, and unfortunately, the animals in captivity didn't tend to live very long.
Imagine.
But the mindset started changing towards the end of the decade and into the middle of the 30s. And that's possibly an economic reason too, because the world economics changed in the 30s with the Great Depression and all of that, and the end of the stock market crash. So, people probably weren't going to blow their money on exotic animals anymore, and that department in Harrods just quietly went away. So that was one interesting tidbit that happened during the 1920s and occurred as a backdrop in this book.
Mm-hmm.
But another one that I incorporated into the story was the burlesque scene at the time. And I did that because I had watched Murdoch Mysteries. I'm a big fan of Murdoch Mysteries. If you're not familiar with that TV show, it's a long-running, popular Canadian murder mystery show that takes place in Toronto, starts at the end of the 19th century, the late 1800s, and into the early 1900s. And I don't know if I talked about this in the last podcast, but the last podcast was Murder at the Mortuary, so we focused more on the forensic elements, and I was also inspired by Murdoch Mysteries to create that element because of the character, the female pathologist. So in this this book, there was a I was inspired by an episode in Murdoch Mysteries where it took place in a burlesque club. And I thought, well, that was part of the scene, part of the times, and I thought it would be interesting to have Ginger go in as an undercover to help solve sort of the plot and the subplots that were
As a burlesque entertainer.
Yes, and so obviously, if you're a fan of Ginger Gold, you know that she does not lean towards a hedonistic lifestyle. She's more in that sense conservative, but she's also very brave, and she's up to anything if it means bringing justice and solving. And of course, her love interest, who was still her love interest at the time, Basil, was not a fan of this. But it was because of someone he was related to that she was doing this anyway. So I had an opportunity to research what burlesque was, and of course the term and what that meant was different then than maybe what we would think of now. I mean, it wasn't. Now we might think of like a striptease club or a lot of nudity, but back then it wasn't.
I think it later turned into that,
like
perhaps more in the United States. But in the days that we're talking about, it was still very much. It was the age of, we have this term nudge, nudge, wink, wink. That was kind of. It was all implied. It wasn't overt, and it was and every script had the potential that it had to come under the purview of Lord Chamberlain.
His office, yes.
The office of Lord Chamberlain had the power to veto, and often was brought under the scrutiny of the man in that office at the time.
Yeah, so the idea behind the burlesque culture there was, how close to the line can you get without breaking the law? So there were a lot more severe sort of laws about decency and everything then, and so burlesque in those days was still about artistic expression. It was about dance, it was acting, it was the lavish costumes, but it was also about subtle hints, double entendre, innuendo. Everybody kind of knew what everyone else was talking about, but nobody actually, or was thinking, but nobody was actually talking about it. And it wasn't just a men's club. A lot of women went, and different class levels went. And in some ways, too, it provided women who, in this industry, if you want to call it, it gave them a financial independence that women in more sort of polite society never had the possibility of living.
It's interesting because when we were discussing this morning, I went on YouTube and I wanted to find out if there was any actual real footage of burlesque from this era. There's lots of footage of burlesque from later on, the 40s, 50s, and out of the United States and stuff, but there is some from the 1920s in London. And it's extremely interesting to watch. Of course, it's in black and white, but it's, the costume, the movements, very interesting.
Yeah, so not like there was a lot of like pantaloon. So, just showing your ankle was risque at the time. Of course, they had the décollage, that goes way back. But, there was still a sense of staying somewhat covered, but also enjoying the female form, appreciating the female form. So this is where, Ginger finds herself, and also where there's a mishap with one of the exotic animals that come to play from the Harrods Wild Animal Kingdom. So what was another interesting backdrop?
Well, another thing that has a connection to the book that was happening around there then is the beginnings of organized crime. And there was no real, they didn't call it really mafia back then, but there was this one real life character that shows up in the book named Charles Sabini. Charles Sabini. And he's kind of regarded as one of the very first kind of kingpins of organized crime. And he, this character, and right around the early 1920s, and in there was when he was really starting to operate. He was a thug. He used to be as a boxer, as a fighter. He had an Italian father and an English mother. And the newspapers back then would have called it the Italian gang, or his gang, and he was really involved in the horse betting.
Yes. And actually, he showed up in the previous book, Murder in the Mortuary. That was his original introduction to Ginger's world. Throughout the series, I sometimes bring in real life characters, and I did that for that plot line in Murder at the Mortuary. And it's still, a lot of these books bleed one into the other in their arcs, and so he was the owner of this particular burlesque club. So a real life person with a fictional ownership.
Yeah, I found him pretty interesting character. For those of you who might be who might know the television series The Peaky Blinders. So this was post Peaky Blinders. So Peaky Blinders was more family. It was less organized. It had kind of more of a remote leadership throughout the city. But this is the first time that it kind of centered on one person who was the head. And it's interesting because he did all these things. They suspected he murdered people and all that stuff, and he had his gang of thugs. But he never really spent much time in jail. Usually when you read about these characters like Al Capone and stuff, they either meet with a violent death, or they spend the rest of their lives in prison, or they're executed in prison or whatever. This guy, he only spent, I think it was 3 years in total in prison. And the first part of that was because Second World War started, and because he was Italian, he was somehow deemed a possible spy or whatever, so they interned him in prison. He was released after the war, and then was accused of receiving stolen goods or something, so he went into jail again, but only for a short time, and was released. So, and then he died, by the time he was released after the war, other syndicates had taken over, and so he was kind of powerless in a way, and he ended up dying, I think, in 1950 or somewhere around there, kind of working just an ordinary job. So he was really famous during the 20s as kind of the kingpin of the crime syndicate and gangs. And then he, as time went on, by the time he was older, he just was kind of a nobody.
Just faded away.
Yeah, I found that interesting.
Yeah. Well, and that is a common thing that happens with a lot of famous people. They have their moment, and then they don't anymore. Yeah, so, I mean, for this book, when I was reviewing it, because I'm writing, or just finished the first draft of book 29 in the series, and I'm beginning now to plot out book 30. So revisiting these series from the beginning, I find that I've forgotten a lot of things. And this book in particular, I don't know why, I had completely forgot all of the different things I had to research and how I interconnected all of the plots and subplots, and using historical backdrops or realities to bring into my fictional world. So I think, that's what we have for you today on Behind the Mystery. We hope you enjoyed this. What we do have is a Patreon group, Inner Circle, where we add extra pieces to the front and back of these videos. And for the Inner Circle, fans of Ginger Gould, we will be talking about a couple more really interesting historical facts and factoids to come. But if you enjoyed this video, hope that you will like it, and please subscribe so you don't miss any more. Each book is going to have something interesting and new and different from the one before. Please let us know in the comments if you've learned anything, or if you know something that we missed and you want to add it. We'd love to hear from you. So, and other than that, I think there'll be other links in the description for the series and the book as well.
All right.
So, yes, we hope you have a great day and continue reading on Behind the Mysteries.
Bye-bye.
Bye.